too. So, Larry, shall we start?
Whatever you want to do. I'm in your hands.
I got it. You're funny. Okay. You're one of the guests that we had one time. A guest like he was. Yeah, it was very natural for him. So we were just laughing for 10 minutes,
Sure.
and yeah, and then we decided to not cut it out.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Well,
Whew.
I'm
Okay.
happy. You can do what you
Hi,
like with this.
Larry.
You can do what you like with this. I mean, I love doing what I do. I take the job seriously and my clients seriously, but what I do take myself very seriously, as you can tell. And that to me is the secret.
Me too.
Yeah, I can
I
tell.
have the
I can tell.
yes is the key to living longer. Oh,
I
thank
can
you.
tell. I can tell, Nick.
Like we take our work very seriously, but then life shouldn't be taken too seriously. Like relax,
Exactly.
chill.
Exactly. I would say, look, somebody's having a laugh at you, so you might as well join in the joke.
Exactly. Okay, Larry, shall we start?
We're gonna start.
Clipboard.
We're gonna start.
Woo. Okay. Hi, Larry. How are you?
I'm really well, Nick, and great to meet you.
I'm glad to meet you too. First off, thank you for saying yes to be interviewed today. My name is Nicolette. I am the creator for the podcast titled You're Worthless. Read that again, the juxtaposition of your very soul. I would like to read a bit of your introduction, your ravishing introduction to our listeners, and then we can get right into our conversation. So, hey everyone, we have Larry Robertson here with us. Larry is passionate about excellence, teamwork, and getting results. His mission is to dare leaders to truly lead and help them make a real difference. And this is what he has done for over 30 years in over 30 countries around the world. He works with chairmen, presidents, CEOs, and an ever-increasing range of executives across a broad range of organizations, as well as with politicians, academics, and private families. Larry is also credited with helping client organizations win over $6 billion in new business. Larry grew up in the Scottish Highlands. He studied at Ampleforth College, Bridge University. Well, I missed that. The Institute of Communication, Advertising and Marketing, London, the RMA, Royal Military Academy of Sandhurst, the UK equivalent of Westpoint. Larry now lives with his Australian-born interior and garden designer wife and their two children on a small early 19th century farm on Sydney's rural fringe where they host events and raise a few Angus cattle. Wow, wow, wow. Welcome, Larry. What a background. Okay, right. I am so tempted to get into the conversation, the nitty-gritty about what you do, but can you share with us first? What was it like growing up as a Larry Robertson?
That's a great question. I was lucky. I mean, I hate the word privilege, but I guess in the modern vernacular, I was privileged. I mean, I didn't want for much. I grew up in a big Highland property, as I mentioned, in the countryside of Scotland, about an hour and a half north of Edinburgh. My father had been in the Royal Navy and a bit of a serious hero in the Second World War and later, actually. But he retired, and so we moved to Scotland. I was very small, and I grew up in a sort of hunting, shooting, fishing world, really. I went to boarding school in Yorkshire, Ampleforth, you mentioned, and then university. And then I went around the world, did various things as a student, and then came back and joined the army, which was a bit of a surprise for everybody, including me, actually. But we'll come back to that, doubtless. So home was lovely. My mother was French, and my parents were quite far apart in age, like 12 years, 13 years. She was lovely. I was the youngest of three boys. We were all separate in age, so we were not that close as brothers. But we get on, and we're still in touch with each other now. Both parents are dead, sadly now. But I have to say, it was a wonderful upbringing. I'm a great fan of living in the countryside. We all like cities and the fun of the cities, and this job has taken me to many, many cities, but around the world, as you mentioned. But I do love coming back here, where I see some rolling hills and get my hands dirty most weekends working outside on the farm or in the garden.
So there's a question here on Podmatch. What is true leadership to you?
Yeah, it's a question I often ask, and this book I've just written, as you're aware, it's really about lots of people in leadership positions. But I always say that leadership is not about position, but disposition. It's really how we feel, how we behave, how we engage with others, how we get on and do the job and achieve things. together with our people or our team or whatever we're trying to achieve. And I find a lot of people, they play leadership roles, they behave in a leadership role, but they don't really give enough of themselves, what I call the authenticity or the AQ authenticity question. We're not getting enough of the real you, the credible, trustworthy, confident, and yes, competent you. We're not getting enough of what I call the EQ or empathy question, which is how you connect and engage with people, how you move people, motivate them, how they feel valued and appreciated, and how you listen for them, and that emotional connection. And there was not enough clarity around intent. And getting on with and finding the way forward and commitment to that. So really that to me sums it up. It's that sort of three elements of true leadership, which is around what I call mutual trust or authenticity, mutual respect, the empathy angle, if you like, and mutual purpose or the intent where we're actually going and what we're trying to do together. And helping people achieve those things is what I'm all about.
I like when you said the emotional connection and the whole, it's supposed to be encompassing of everything, right? And I want to go to your book, actually. I mean, yeah, we'll touch on that. But then a story about a bit of your background. Like, you moved quite a bit. Why so? Well, like, what was your career? What did you call yourself as?
I suppose reflecting on my career, such as it is, I think the modern way of describing my career would be a portfolio career. That sounds smart. But
Portfolio.
It wasn't necessarily designed that way. But I suppose it just happened that I mentioned I joined the army without much warning. I won't go into too much detail other than I joined the army, if you like, overnight, and suddenly found myself at 8 o'clock one morning in the employment of Her Majesty the Queen in London as a young guardsman, a potential officer, having signed up at Wellington Barracks next to Buckingham Palace, and all due to a mad Irish friend of mine who was going to do the same. So, and I'd been just travelling around the world doing various things as a student after university, and he convinced me to go off there after a very good dinner the night before and probably rather too much wine. He took me off to there the next morning, and so suddenly I was employed by the Queen and in the British Army. So it was a bit of a shock. And when I told my father, he was amazed. I mean, he was pleased in many ways, given his military background, the Royal Navy. But of all his three sons, I was probably the least likely to go into uniform with any. In fact, he just roared with laughter when I told him I'd just joined the army. He couldn't believe it. But anyway, he was partly proud, partly proud, and probably relieved. And
Obviously.
Then his youngest son was going to do something useful. And I was very lucky to have had an extraordinary career. Very lucky. 6 years as a young officer and became a captain. And in fact, served in my first posting was Hong Kong as a young officer. So I used to come down to Singapore quite often, to your part of the world, and even went to Malaysia and went to KL, which was great. And so I got to know that part of the world fairly well. I returned to Singapore a lot nowadays and Hong Kong. So that was, but I always knew the army wasn't me forever. To me, it was a good way, if you like, to grow up, I think, probably, to actually turn out and learn about leadership, teamwork, achievement, getting things done, often in quite challenging circumstances. And in the army was served in Hong Kong, in Central America and Belize, which was also a British colony in those days. In Kenya, more about training exercises in Northern Ireland, of course, and in other parts of the world. And so my last job in the army was working as the ADC, Chief of the Defence Staff, who was then, if you like, the most important man in British forces. The American term would be the Chief of the Joint Chiefs, that's right, based in Washington. Well, this was London. So it meant, there I was in my mid-20s, with access to 10 Downing Street with the Prime Minister, access to the Pentagon and going to Washington, as I mentioned, NATO headquarters in Europe.
Wow.
So suddenly, I'm traveling around the world in their private jets, all this stuff. Suddenly, in my mid-20s, found myself exposed to geopolitics, I suppose, is the term we all use today, writ large, and meeting some incredibly well-educated, smart, and powerful people. And that taught me a lot about, I suppose, leadership and what leadership really looked like, not just at my level as a young army officer or among my brother officers or even the battalion level, but right up to the top, working with a man who had reached the top, and similarly with people, his peers in the military, but also diplomacy and politics and the like. So it was fascinating, actually. But I think it also showed me that I would never be smart enough or ambitious enough to become a general or a field marshal. Probably carry on doing something else.
No, why not?
Well, I think
Then we could do some, we can do some laughter like yours, like,
it was
at the.
it's great. It's a lovely thought, and you're kind. I mean, people did actually try to persuade me to stay on, but I think I always sort of felt it was a fairly short term, just part of my growing up and part of my experience. And I always see myself a bit of I'm a traditional upbringing, as I mentioned, in a fairly sort of upper class British twit background. I describe myself, but equally there's this sort of rebel in me too. Hence I'm wearing my leather jacket today with a motorbike. So I like riding and like farming on this property. I get into the smart suit, go to the city and see my clients, of course, but I quite enjoy just being a little bit different, having that sort of mixture of person, bringing out
Eccentric.
a broader sense of personality. So I was the rebellious side of me needed to have an air. And having done six years or so in a more traditional role, a more hierarchical British type, traditional historic military background, which was fantastic, but very monocultural, as you can imagine, very white Anglo-Saxon, etc. But so I then did the complete left-hand turn and joined an advertising agency, which was completely the opposite. It was absolutely horizontal in terms of structure. And my first boss, I'm pleased to tell you, Nick, was a lady. She was my age. She was 26. So I just left the army, 26, and as a Captain Robertson in this rather grand job and an extraordinary job, and found myself now almost scrubbing the dishes and working for this lady who was very smart, very bright, and also a marathon runner. So she would take me apart in small pieces every day. And quite rightly, by the way. And I learnt so much from her. And her boss was a woman too. And this agency was voted the most creative agency in the world. And I realised quite quickly why. That it was all about diversity. Diversity, obviously, of gender, as I mentioned, but diversity of every aspect, of background, of personality, of style, of education, of everything. And so you had a whole mixture of people working in this place with one common purpose. And the common purpose to put out the world's best advertising for our clients. To help our clients succeed. And for 3 years in a row, it was voted the most creative agency in the world by its peers and by advertisers around the world. And so the privilege of working there was extraordinary. And I've always loved that, almost 6 years there too.
6 years, that's a long time. And I love when you said, it's like, it's more of a, it's very, I don't want to say degrading, because because I'm a person of I like to have a taste of every industry. So right now I think this is my 7th industry already at 30, turning 34.
Right.
So, and that's I attribute this knack, or maybe the confidence that I have to be talking to random people online all over the world, because I just want to give it a try. Some of my peers, they're like, Nick, how?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I just, no, yeah. I don't know, but I just enjoy talking to them, and I like to learn from different people, and of course you get to learn from books as well, but then it's different when you're interacting with somebody, and you get to see the EQ side of it, the body language, the gestures, and everything. Yes.
I'm not gesturing very much.
So
I
Larry,
need to gesture more for you. No, but you're right. I think this.
You're doing pretty well.
I think listening to you, I describe my career as a portfolio career, and I've given you a sense of the first 2 elements of that, and of course, there's a third element. But I think I'll describe your career as like a bookcase. If I was a portfolio, yours is a bookcase of career. I think
a bookcase of career. I mean, yeah, maybe. I should write a book, right? Yeah, people can come up to me. My dad has been like, "You should write a book because you've spoken to so many people. Get their consent, and then yeah, definitely, it's in the pipeline. Maybe the next, I don't know. I might say next 2 years, perhaps. I might sit down and then just start writing 3 months from now. Yes, Larry, can you share with a story about leadership failure and what you learned from it?
Yes, I think it's a lovely thing to talk about. I think perhaps I'm going to put it in a commercial sense. Surprisingly, I won't talk about leadership in the military sense, although there's plenty of examples there, and or in the advertising world where again leadership was so critically important. But as I mentioned, a fairly flat organisation, but obviously there was a managing director, there was a senior executive and the like. But one of the stories that sticks out for me is a particular sort of hero of mine, as a CEO running what was then, in fact still is, one of the world's biggest mining companies. And it was in trouble in the late 1990s, so sort of 20 odd years ago, but shortly after I started this business. And I was fortunate enough to be introduced to the company and was working with the chairman at the time. And there was quite a lot of issues, and the chairman the shareholders were very unhappy, and the share price had collapsed as a result. That they weren't the reason they were unhappy, and there was other problems going on in terms of their what you would call ESG today, in terms of how they're treating the environment, from a social point of view, and even governance. So there were a lot of issues around the company, and I brought him to work with the chairman and to help him sort of step up to deal with a whole range of stakeholders, literally from government and regulators through to investors and obviously employees and the like. And the previous CEO had to go, and they eventually, I then worked with the acting CEO, and I think that pretty went very well. But they were determined to bring in an external CEO from outside, and they found this American. And he was an extraordinary man, really very practical, very down to earth, an engineer by training, and been president, CEO of a large energy company. So a slightly unusual appointment. And on the first time ever that this organization, which has been going for a long time, had hired an external CEO. And what I loved about him was the fact that he was just so down to earth and very good at getting on and getting out to meet people very quickly. So within the first 3 months, as we do, we get out and we obviously have to go and meet investors, go and see the various mines around the world, get around and see the people. But just very keen to understand what made this organization tick. What was it that had got it to where it was today after 100 years, but also what had caused the problems, the best he could identify. And then it was a question of creating what he called a charter. And it's a word I've adopted. I call it a way, but it's a charter, really. And actually, I helped him, work with him on putting that together. And it's an example of it in my book, which is more about my own charter, but it follows the same structure. And I often work with executives and senior people putting their own charter or their own narrative. I put more of a narrative, putting that narrative together about who we are as an organization, what we stand for, or why we're here, and so forth. And he managed to encapsulate, with a bit of help, but as I said, I helped from others, a few others did too, from all this research that was done in these meetings, put together on one sheet of paper, really what this organization was all about. And as I said, what it stood for, why it existed, where it was trying to get to, how it was going to do that, all on one sheet of paper, and its values and the like. And it just reminded me so much of what I had to do in the military, that you have to have that simplicity and that clarity around who we are as a platoon, or who we are what the job is. And in the advertising world, I sort of managed to introduce some of that thinking, I'm pleased to say, in my role in the agency, to get simple clarity. So for me, he was really impressive in terms of all sorts of things. But firstly, just being himself, natural, authentic, down to earth, not self-important, obviously a smart man, but just able to share and be appropriate in whatever the circumstance. So I would see him in all sorts of different circumstances, and the ability to give the appropriate authenticity of him in that was brilliant. Secondly, he listened to people. He made people feel valued, whoever they were. He understood their issues. He wanted to see what mattered to them and the like. And able, as I've just said, to develop that clarity around where we're going, how we're going to get there, and paint the pathway, and then get out there and encourage people to do that from a CEO level, running a company which in those days employed 60, 70,000 people.
Yeah. So, wow, I am now curious. So you've been helping people over 30 countries around the world for over 30 years. Can I say, like, are you a coach, or are you independent, or are you still attached to the agency, or are you on your own?
Thank you. So I left the advertising agency in London, and then I married an Australian girl. I'd been here before, but I married my wife, who was studying in London. So we decided to come and live here. We thought, let's give Australia a go, although she would be very happy to stay in the UK, I think. But I thought we'd like to come and live here and see what it's like. So we thought we'd come for 3 years, and we're still here 35 years later. There we go. And so I came and I set up an advertising business on my own. So I set up my own ad business, and which did pretty well. It wasn't a huge enterprise, but it did pretty well. And somebody wanted to buy it, much to my amazement. And I'm not overly commercial, frankly. But nevertheless, so something said to me in my head, this may be a good idea. And I think I sort of had fun with it for 4 years. And it just so happened we had a pretty awful recession in the 90s happening here. And I thought, well, actually, probably quite a good time to get out of this. So anyway, so it was bought. I had a bit of money, and that money I used to buy this collection of buildings, this sort of derelict farm as it then was back in those days. This probably goes back to the early 1800s, which for Australia since settlement, since the late 1700s, of course, when the British arrived. Going back that far is quite
Wow.
old for Australia, if you like, although, of course, not really old given the indigenous peoples that have been here for tens of thousands of years. So I fell in love with this property, and we then began to make it our home over time. And then thought, what am I going to do? And so, without taking on a long journey, I did with self-identification, self-analysis, and came up with really what I was all about, and what I felt I was all about, taking some advice from other people too. And again, I describe that process in the book under what I call self-leadership, because then you can lead other people until you actually know yourself and you lead yourself.
Actually, you can lead yourself, yeah.
And then I started this business. And in those days, things like you mentioned the word coaching, that didn't really exist in the business world. It was on the football field, yes, but not in the business world. There was sort of help around communication a bit, that sort of stuff. But so I talked about very much advice. So I've always described myself as an advisor. And my business, Robertson Burns, is advisors. And while obviously coaching is involved, and I get sort of bracketed in some of the executive coaching areas from human resource people, there's even a bit of training involved too, of course. But fundamentally, it's about advice. It's about helping people step up, but giving them a bit of direction and the sort of pathway forward.
So sorry, because I am a chartered accountant myself. So, when I talk about business or investments, at my ears perk up. You went on to set up your own agency, and then you sold it. Somebody was interested to buy it. Did you have that in mind? Like, was that your goal?
No, it wasn't.
When you set it up.
It wasn't, Nick. I mean, and sorry, I didn't sell it for a big. I didn't sell it for a huge price.
Pretty good.
I didn't.
Wow.
I didn't sell it for a huge price, although I might have needed your help or somebody like you to help me. And I often work with people.
I haven't graduated then. I think I haven't had my qualification then at the time. So I would love to help you now.
Well, I was I was very lucky. I was just approached by these people as an organization. Actually, they had a big recruitment business, but in different areas, and they were just intrigued by what I was doing, and because I was doing something a bit unusual, and I knew the individual. We got on pretty well, the two of us, and eventually said, I'd like to buy your business. And I was a bit surprised, and I had not thought of selling it. I thought of possibly expanding it into other areas or trying to make it grow, and that was sort of my main thing. But I think, but equally by then I thought I had a very good somebody running it for me. I mean, assistant if you like, but she was doing a great job. We had just a small team of people, and I felt maybe I have done enough of this, and maybe I can do something else now. I don't think I hadn't quite fulfilled, if you like, and found that ultimate fulfilling sort of purpose. So it was, given it was sort of first role here, when I came to live here years ago, I said I'm going to work for myself. I'm not going to work for anybody else. When we leave London, I'm going to work for myself and somehow do something in Australia on my own, for me.
Yeah.
And obviously not just for me, but for my wife, and more importantly for the bank manager. And the bank manager, by the way, is still part of the threesome, I'm afraid. But perhaps he doesn't get quite such a big. He does have quite a big seat at the table as he used to do. Put it that way. So that's and my wife is the same. I mean, she's done very well. She's also self-employed, if you like. She came here and set up her own design business we found a young man to be partnered with a very good designer. The two of them. She's an interior decorator, designer, and now very well known in the gardening field. And very successful in the gardening field. So we both agree we're going to try and do our own thing. And so I'm proud to say for the 35 years or 6 years I've lived in this country, I've not worked for anybody other than my wife and the bank manager.
I love that. That is the life, Larry. That is the life. You tick up a lot of boxes you've made. You've done very, very well for yourself. That you are one of my role models now, like really. I am stepping out of my corporate job, so into therapy and coaching, and becoming a boss of my own. So
look at you, You're doing the same.
Maybe buy a farm somewhere.
You're doing the same. I mean, you do. I mean, as you would know already. I mean, if you're now totally on your own, you would know there are many nights when you lie awake at night wondering how you're going to pay the bills at the end of the month. I mean, there's
exactly.
And then bringing up children, educating the children, etc. There's some pretty frightening moments when you don't have that cushion, you don't have that regular salary, holiday pay, sick pay, all this stuff. If you're sick, you can't just stay in bed and get paid. Unfortunately, all these things are a bit of a challenge. But on the other hand, many people succeed in doing it, and I'm proud in my small way to to half my life, or certainly the 2/3 of my career now, has been spent in this role rather than working for other people.
And I can tell that you're very, very happy. And you're a very, very bright
I
person.
am happy.
I love it.
One sort of happy.
You're on the right path.
I wouldn't say self-satisfied, because that would be awful. But I think I'm not quite fulfilled. I'm pretty well fulfilled. I'm happy that even at my age now, and a lot of people are retiring at my age. I think, well, I don't want to retire, because what would I do? A, B, I mean, while my brain is still half ticking over and my body seems to get me out of get out of bed and get on with it every day. Let's keep going. And my wife feels, she's probably a bit younger than me. We both feel the same. We like living here, and a lot of people come here. People come and visit this place and see what we're doing, see what she's doing. So while we continue to make a difference, that's the most important thing. If we can make a worthwhile difference, we make an impact, help people in some way or other, then let's keep going.
One person at a time. Let's keep going.
Sort of.
I like that.
Sort of, yeah, sort of.
Larry, you talk about clarity and humanity. What do you mean?
Clarity and humanity. Yes, that's nice. You've heard of head and heart, left and right brain, and so forth. So in my way, so clarity is very much about who we are. What would I say? We touched on earlier around that comment around charter. It's sort of who are we? What are we standing for? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? So it's that sort of clarity of, if you like, of purpose or identity or brand, of purpose, values, mission, vision, and of course strategy. So there's and if it's just a conversation or a presentation, then it's more about clarity around, well, what's the core message here? What's the purpose of this? What's the structure? How are we going to put it together? So that's clarity. And I find a lot of people I work with are not overly clear. I mean, I'm sometimes not overly clear myself. But I mean, I've noticed that we tend to forget the sort of power of simplicity, I think, that we often overcomplicate things. And getting back to the basics of what are we actually trying to say? And I learned the power of the headline. The power of the headline in the advertising agency that I worked, as I mentioned, this very creative agency, where copywriters and art directors were paid a fortune just to come up with just one or two words that encapsulate the brand values, the purpose for that target market. And I've never forgotten that. And so I'm quite tough with my clients. So what are you actually trying to say? Give it to me in 3 words, in 5 words, maybe 10 seconds, that type of thing. So getting that very clarity around the goal, the vision we're trying to get to, the core message. The other is humanity, as you said, is that, and one of my books about both these, of course, but I always remind people that we don't have to listen. How do we get people to listen? And that means giving more of oneself as the leader, because leadership starts with listening. It starts with speaking, thinking, listening, etc. And then, so you inform people, you hopefully influence them, then you inspire them. But that means they've got to listen for a start. They want to be informed for a start. How do you get the best out of helping the individual leader, him or herself, getting them to be at ease with themselves, getting them to give more of themselves than just the smart, capable individual and the role they perform, but actually the humanity within that role, who he or she really is. And of course, then how they come across, how they connect, how they engage, so that they bring out the best of the mindset, the attitude of the listener, so that people actually open up and want to be part of this thing. And that's the human element. So you've got the clarity, which is, okay, what are we doing here? Why are we doing it? Where are we going? And the humanity element, who is the leader, if you like, the speaker person or the person setting the pathway, and who is the audience, or who is the follower? Who are the followers of the team or the stakeholders? And how do we get the two to connect to actually be able to deliver the clarity and then achieve it?
Clarity, humanity, at the baseline of it, simplicity.
Yeah, simplicity. Yeah.
I'm just thinking of a framework right now in my head.
Yeah, simplicity. Is it? Yeah.
What generational disconnects do leaders need to be aware of, and how should they deal with them?
That's a question I get asked quite often, and it's an interesting question because obviously I've got a couple of children who are in sort of Generation Z or Generation Z, they call them now, in their 20s. I have to say that they've taught me a few things. One of which is that baby boomers don't know everything, and even if they do, they don't need to behave as though they did. And so I've learned. It took me a while to realize this from my eldest daughter, who's a wonderful girl in many, many ways and very talented, but she didn't want to be told that she really wanted to be listened, appreciated, valued. And we baby boomers are very good. We're very good at telling. We're very good at telling people. And I think part of the personality too. So that's been a big eye opener. So even at home, I began to realize actually that I need to be a little bit more adaptable, a little bit more self-aware, a little bit more in tune and aware of the expectations of those around me. And that is so true, of course, of leadership, that leaders have always needed to be self-aware and aware of others. But I don't think, sadly, that particularly in the business world, that has always been the case. And increasingly today, as you point out in your question, that there are now 4 generations in the workplace, just about. My generation is sort of easing out now slowly, and then there's the next one, and so forth. And Generation Z is now getting into the workplace. And I asked this question, and I think, people, I'm told, they don't want to work. Generation Z, they don't want to work. They want to get the CEO role straight away. I mean, all the things, lots of stuff, which is quite rude in a way. And I say, well, hang on, they're not much different to what you and I were at that age. The only real difference is they have the internet at their fingertips. That they can, and they're very knowledgeable, much more knowledgeable than we were. They know what's going on. They can, within seconds, they can see what's happening in New York or in Penang or in Johannesburg. They can see what's going on in the sports field or the business world or the share market or the arts or whatever. So they're very savvy, and they're also, a lot of people are starting up their own businesses, and some of them doing very, very well. There's a sense that people can get on and achieve stuff. And if you want people to work for you in your workforce, then you have to do all the things I'm talking about in my book, which is to bring more of you to work, not just be the boss, as I said, not just be the smart guy or girl who knows what to do and thinks how the job should be done and just tells people, but actually needs to be more with their humanity, let people understand their authenticity, their openness, let them then also, the secondly, is engage with people better, try to find out what motivates them, what are they excited about, or they're not, what they're worried about, what is it that gets them out of bed in the morning, what drives them, listen to them, appreciate them. We all want to feel appreciated, even in my age, we want to feel appreciated, so appreciate them, and then bring them together and talk about what we're trying to achieve and get their ideas. Because I've often found, even before all the Generation Z, that people on the front line, and even I was in the front line, we often had quite good ideas that never got as far as the boardroom or the CEO suite. Perhaps talk with them and see, this is what we're trying to achieve, this is the goal. Get them involved with that, give some sense of meaning around that, how are they going to contribute? But equally ask them, do they see a better way to get? So there's create a real sense of team and collective community. And I don't think many so-called leaders are good at that. So perhaps I could summarize that.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll just summarize that very quickly, because I think get back to simplicity. So you're creating sort of mutual trust. There's an openness. There's got a confident credibility. There's a mutual trust, mutual respect. So if you want them to respect you, you have to respect them. So that's what I call the emotional connection, the empathy equation, if you like. And then thirdly is that mutual purpose. Not just the single purpose of the organization, but mutual purpose. How do you bring people, get them together to work together so that we're all in this together and we all achieve together? That's teamwork.
That's right. Wow. Thank you for that insight, Larry. I think you're really right on the dot right there.
Well, I'd love to ask Nick.
Larry, how can lead?
Am I allowed to ask you a question or not?
Yeah.
Because if I do ask you a question,
Yeah, of course. This is a two-way.
Because you're in you're in that sweet spot. You're sort of just over 30, I think you said. So you're just at the top of that Generation Z. Do you think? If I ask you simply, putting the other way around, what is it that you feel is missing? What's the bit that needs to be bridged between the bosses, if you like, whether they're my generation or even the one or two below, the bosses and the new workforce and your generation and maybe a bit younger? Is there anything that I haven't added? Is there something I missed there? Do you think?
I think you hit. So that's why when you said it, it's like I wanted to really pinpoint on the part where generation millennial. I think millennial is Z. No, not Z. Before that, yeah.
It's millennial then Y.
Because right now we're in the mid. Yeah. So millennial and Y is this. Y and no, hang on. I'm mistaken. X, Y, and then Z, right? So Z is the 1997 and above, and then I'm before that. So right now we're in our mid 30s to 40s, and then the Zs are the 26, 27, and then you have the alphas, which are 20. So right now, like you mentioned, people, because they do not want to work, they don't want to toil. Let's put it that way. They want to get that position and then that pay right on the it's just, on the silver platter for them. To me, I've had bosses who are also baby boomers, and they're still operating in that kind of mindset. And not I don't want to call anybody out right now, but one of the reasons why I'm choosing to move was because we don't see eye to eye anymore on the way the organization is going. So on one hand, they say that, okay, we need your input, please. So this is how we're gonna gather your input and then include that in the strategy of the whole organization. But on the other hand, when we've already filled up so many surveys and
Yeah.
whatnot, what's the culture like? No action has been
Exactly.
taken. And millennials like myself or the younger ones is that, oh, we can only be here so long, and once we've gotten that tenure, that normal tenure of 2 years, so that you're not seen as being a job hopper, we're gonna leave. It's either we go to another startup companies, or okay, we join another MNCs, and it's, how do I say this? I think a balance of both generations should be the best. To my management staff, at least my management staff, I'm more on the human side first than the work, because I like to impact, I like to connect first, and then I like to engage, because that's more powerful rather than you have somebody telling you, oh, do A, B, C, D, E. And to your point, I mean, bringing back to full circle, I do not like being told. I need to understand why I'm asked to do certain things, and before just rather doing it. So corporations right now are transitioning. The leaders are, they're nearing their retirement age, and younger ones are going up. So I'm also excited to see where all these MNCs are going. And you yourself, Larry, you've been working with a lot of leaders yourself. So what is your what do you see? What is your trajectory? What's the trajectory like on leaders in this large organizations happening in the next 5-10 years?
Yes. I mean, I'm privileged that quite a lot of the work I do involves succession. So it helps about helping
Yes.
potential CEOs, or maybe the level below, but step up into the next role and take over from the boss. So I've had the privilege of doing that quite often in organizations around the place. And so I've noticed, I think, that there is on the whole, there's certainly a willingness to want to learn. I think the generations, as you say, the younger ones, the ones who were generation maybe X, wouldn't they, probably? Generation X, so they'd be in there, and even younger, so 40s and 50s, 50s probably up. So they would be more aware. Obviously, there's been better leadership programs around since then. Human resource, more focus on in these sorts of these areas, more balanced view of leadership. So I think there's a general view, and if people get into, if they're in the category of being a potential successor, so they've already been assessed probably all the way, for the past several years anyway. So that there's just 2 or 3, let's say, in any organization usually that they're likely to get to the top. And even then, it may not be that. It may not be the case. It might be somebody from the outside comes in, but that's usually only when something's going really wrong or they want a big change. Ideally, you promote from internally. You find your CEO and so forth from inside the organization, because they grow up with it and they bring the right culture and values and the like. But my experience is that on the whole, they still have the human frailties we all have. So I can think of the most recent one. I've just helped become CEO of a big public company here in recent months. I mean, very, very, very smart person, and very smart, and been in the organization about 12 years, knew the business very, very well. Was certainly seen as a very strong contender, but there was another internal candidate too, a different skill set, not being in the organization so long, but had much greater strengths in some areas than others. So it was very interesting, and I thought, if you could put these two together, and that's often the case, if you combine these two people, you'd have the perfect CEO probably. And I was mandated to work with both of them by the board to help them. And they've been through the psychometric tests, of course, that I get involved in to a degree, but I'm not a psychologist, but I get involved in some of those things. And they were looking at an external candidate too. which say let's go through their proper governance. They decided they would do that, get a test what was out there in terms of the market, potential CEO candidates.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm proud to say that one of those internal ones got it. But that person had to move the dial quite seriously in terms of the areas where there was seen to be shortcomings. And I'm happy to say I helped that person do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And sorry, I missed the part of the age. Which generation is he
So
in?
they were. So it's interesting. So the one who got the job would have been 44, 45, and the one who
So okay,
the
that's
one who
Generation X.
did not get the job would have been just slightly. It would have been 50. I think, just slightly older. One was female, one was male.
And let me guess, the female did not get it.
Correct. But she was probably the most. I mean, I think the general view was that she probably would, and I think the board view for a long time was she probably would. But, and I don't want to go into too much detail here, but I think put it simply, the man, he worked hard at lifting the areas he needed to work at. He was hungry for the job, possibly more hungry than she might be, possibly hungry. And I think certainly, I think he'd been in that organization for 12 years and felt this was always his ambition. Whereas she was fairly newer in the organization, or she's newer in the role that she was doing, and she's very, very smart and a really lovely person in many, many ways. Perhaps not so broad in terms of experience, but I think it was a bit of a surprise for people. I don't think I wasn't so surprised. I mean, I obviously couldn't back one or the other. I had to be totally fair with both, and they both knew I was working with the other. So that does happen.
Yeah.
So I had to keep the Chinese walls in place, as they say, and be totally unbiased in terms of who I was working, what I'm trying to achieve, and keep those confidences. So I wasn't quite as surprised as some, I think, when they did appoint him.
Wow, you've gotten into you're invited to the rooms that people will be making decisions. You're the person that they go to. Wow, I'm speaking to one.
Well, and say, hey, I'm one of many, put it that way. I'm probably down the bottom of the list, I think. But I'm just lucky to have had. I'm lucky to have had experience at that sort of C-suite level, if you call it that, or board level, from pretty early on in this role. And as I think I mentioned in the role I had in that working with the Chief of Defence Staff, exposure in my mid-20s to deal with people who are at the top of their tree, whether it's the military, whether it's diplomacy or politics or government in some form, or even business, I think just taught me the ability to be able to deal with people, communicate with people who are much senior to me and much more important than me and much smarter than me, frankly. But to be able to communicate, and once I worked out what I was doing there and what was expected of me and how I could help. And I've always seen myself in the help business. I mean, it sounds a bit of a cliche, but the job I'm doing is about helping people succeed, helping people step up, achieve their ambition or their potential, and make a difference. And not to make a difference for themselves and their bank balance, but make a difference for those around them, and to be able, therefore, to contribute and make an impact, something worthwhile, and they can be proud of, but equally those around them also benefit from. And I had that privilege when I was young, as a young army officer. I was given that opportunity by my company commander and commanding officer who ran the battalion. I think the military is very good at spotting potential talent, if you like, and very good at identifying.
Yeah, spotting.
Where can that
that's a skill. That's a skill.
It is, and identify where can that talent be best utilized, and how do we develop that talent best, and how can we help the talent grow? And the military, Greg, it's really funny when in the military there is no HR department, there's no human resource department in the military. The officers, the officers are the HR people, and so I try and explain to people in business. I'm saying the CEO is the number one HR officer, but people look at me rather blankly. But I say that's what it is.
That's true. Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you. You remind me of that master negotiator I saw once in master class. I don't know the name. I think Chris Voss. He's a negotiator with the FBI. So you kind of look the part as well.
I think you're right. So. Yeah, I'm not sure I was that. Occasionally I've been described as the Dex 007, but I'm not sure that's quite. I'm probably left that a bit too late in my career, but we'll see. You never know.
Yeah. And then you were in the army, so okay. I'm so tempted to ask about MI6, but then okay, never mind. Moving on. Maybe that's another episode.
Yeah.
Okay, it was a joke. Larry, how can leaders unlock more innovation in their organization?
Yes, well, I think innovation's an word that gets bandied about quite a lot. And to me, it's obviously it requires awareness of what's going on in the world generally. I attended a talk last night in Sydney on artificial intelligence, AI, and regenerative AI, and it was fascinating. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on AI today, as we know, and there's lots of things you can read. And I even use a little bit of AI in my work today. This was a futurist, a very, very clever individual. I've known him for a while, and he's about 30 of us in the room. And you really think, wow, this is innovation. This is, how do I do my job better? And that's really, to me, what's always been the question. The question I always ask myself, but probably don't answer it very well, but I certainly get my clients and others to ask it of themselves and of their people. Is there a better way? And innovation really is the answer to that, isn't it? I mean, is there a better way even to do this podcast? Probably, or have this interview? Probably. In fact, we already worked that out. When I was having trouble, with the syncing of the camera on the other camera, and then we decided to go on the iPhone, which is working better in terms of the transmission and so forth. Is there a better way? Innovation is about looking. Is there a new, not just for the sake of it, but is it going to help us create more efficiency, help things do faster, less expensively, and better, of course, and be better at what we do in terms of an organization or as an individual. So I think we need to sort of work out what is innovation, and then say, well, as I said earlier, who do we sort of go to help us identify that? Well, partly the leader, him or herself, needs to have self-awareness, what's happening in the market or more broadly industry, and even beyond as people are, and that might just come from reading and watching podcasts even, but getting help from maybe the odd external consultants or the like, yes. But also it's talking to and communicating with people in the organization, giving people the permission to step up, to make them feel safe. What's called psychological safety today. I think it's rather unnecessary. We don't need psychology, but making people feel safe, valued, as I said, to speak up and contribute, to put the hand up and say, I've got an idea on this. It could be on the work, down on the factory floor. It could be in the office. It could be out in the field. It could be, how we put presentations together. It could be how we manufacture a particular bit of equipment or we ship it. Is there a better way? And I think if we sort of ask that question of ourselves almost daily, and they start the day and at the end of the day, and get that as part of a culture, then you start creating an innovative culture, and people feel again involved and they can contribute to that.
Yeah, included.
I think just
so, Larry, what is next for you?
Sorry, got another question. Sorry, yes. Yeah.
Yes. No. Yes, please carry on. That was my next question.
No, so
you were saying?
I was thinking that, IBM, we all know IBM. IBM was a company been going for over 100 years. And in America, a huge technology company. The man who founded it, whose name tipped my tongue, and I can't quite remember, I should remember. He had this great big sign, the photographs in the sort of early 1900s. And it was all about, it was in international business machines, what it was. It was the early days of calculation machines, really, processing machines. And he had this one word, a huge sign was sort of hanging around some of these work floors and on the wall. And the word was simply think, THINK. And again, I think I always stuck in my mind that, again, talk about simplicity. There's a good example of simplicity. But also just think, and either think before you do, think before you say, think, is there a better way? Think, why are we doing it this way? And I think there's such a lovely, we'll think now. I think there's such a lovely way, a simple way of encapsulating, even just seeing the word. Why is that word there? I need to think. What am I doing here? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing it this way? Is there a better way to do this?
And I like to couple that with the humane aspect of it. I think the humanity aspect of it. You think, yes, think, but then also, feel at the same time. Like, so let's say you are thinking of a better way, but then how will that make the departments feel? Are they going to be equally, are they going to benefit equally from this? If, let's say, you are introducing new solutions or strategies, or you're engineering some of the processes, right?
Exactly. And again, that you're touching on an important aspect of leadership, which I've talked about more around, but it is, it's about thinking, feeling, doing. It's about, let's think about something. And you get people as a leader, you want people to think about something. And then you want to feel about it. Is that a good thing? Do I want to do that? Am I engaged with that? Do I feel comfortable with that? Do I understand it? And then I go and do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that think, feel, do is very much the sort of process we need to think of as a leader. If we want people to do something, we've got to step back, as I said earlier, get them to think about it a bit and what it really means and what it looks like and so forth, and then why we're doing it. And then the feeling is, well, what meaning can I create that for me, and how do I get involved, emotionally involved with it, so that I give my all, and then we'll go and do it. Then the
Yes.
leader's job is to ignite all those elements of it. And I find, as I said earlier, that
Yeah.
most people in leadership positions really are just good managers, and that's fine. Nothing wrong. We need management as well, but they stop at the thinking bit. It's the thinking bit, the telling bit.
Yeah.
There's the sort of task bit, which obviously you have to have a task, but they don't expect that the feeling bit is missed out.
Mm-hmm.
The involvement, the engagement, the inclusion around how we're going to do what that really means for the people. So we've got the sort of, we've got the sort of what, but we haven't got enough of the how. We haven't got enough of the why.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for that, Larry. So, Larry, what is next for you?
That's a lovely question. I sort of, as I mentioned earlier, Nick, probably feel at my age, a lot of people are sort of hanging up their boots from one form or another. But I want to keep going, but I realise I'm not the toy boy that I was, and that I'm sort of moving on with age, although physically it's still pretty fit and the brain is still operating just as I think you're picking up. So I call it Larry 2.0.
Yes.
Larry 2.0 is sort of the book which I've written is definitely a sort of foundation of that, I guess. I mean, people kept saying to me for years, we're going to write a book, and I said, really? I haven't got time. There's always excuses. And then, do we read another book on leadership and communication and all these sorts of things? And eventually I started getting on with it, and then COVID happened, and that helped me finish it off. And then getting it published, I was lucky to have it published in London, which I thought was a sort of bigger market than Australia in terms of getting bigger exposure and international exposure. And they're not so celebrity mad as Australia is. And in Australia, publisher would ask me, but you're not very well known, are you? And I said, well, no, I'm not a pop star, film star, football star, etc. But then I used to rather cheekily say, but that lady who wrote about Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, when she sat in that cafe in Edinburgh writing about Harry Potter, I don't think she was very well known then either. And of course, that doesn't go down very well. So anyway, so the book was published.
Thank you. Yes. What a clap back.
The book was published. The book was released end of last year, and it's going pretty well. So that's given me the confidence, I think, after all this time, because like a lot of people, I suffer from imposter syndrome. There's always that sort of, are you really any good at this? And why are you doing this? And who are you anyway? So we all have those. I think we all have those demons.
Often,
we all have those demons. I'm not sure you do, Nick.
yeah,
I'm not sure
often the high achievers.
Well, I think even some high achievers have those. Even high achievers. And I think it's not a bad thing in a way. We do need a little bit of self-doubt. We do need a little bit of questioning ourselves. I mean, otherwise, it becomes dangerous, actually. If we don't stop and think or ask people's opinions and seek advice occasionally, even at the top of the tree, people can make some big mistakes. So I think, having got the book out, I think it's given me the confidence to say, well, actually, there's something worthwhile. I've had some wonderful feedback, very generous feedback on it. It's not the world's best book, of course not. But it's, I also articulate my philosophy, my approach. And I've had some really great feedback. One guy who was very well educated from Harvard said to me, you've really successfully challenged the given doctrines on leadership. And this is what this book is. And it breaks the boredom barrier. Unlike so many self-help books, which can be, you buy them and then you put them down after a few chapters. And so leadership books and management books are lots of lovely case studies, but a bit theoretical maybe. And they're all written mostly by academics who are very smart, well-intentioned people, but perhaps have not really been in the trenches and not actually been close to what's really going on and been a leader themselves. So I think this book is fairly practical. It's not rocket science, but it gives people some simple ideas what to do and explains it very simply. And those 3 Qs that I talk about, the 3 qualities or 3 Qs of true leaders: your authenticity quality or quotient, your empathy quotient, and your intent quotient or quality. So I'm going to sort of continue on based on this book, probably continuing doing what I'm doing, but a one-on-one work. I'd like to do probably a bit more public speaking. I do a bit of that, but probably some more. And the market I'm going to focus on more is the succession area I just talked about earlier, because I realise that there's a need there, that people, a lot of very smart people get into they move up the ranks, but they're missing some of the qualities of leadership, so they need a bit of help.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Larry, what is your heart's greatest wish?
Gosh, the heart's wish, I wish people in leadership positions all over the world would read my book at the start. But not just because my book sales will go up, that'd be nice. But more seriously, because they might actually learn something. They might learn something. We look at people in leadership positions and I won't mention names, but I think we all know we're talking about, whether it's the wars that are created, the disputes that go on for hundreds of tens and tens of years in parts of the world, the behavior of some people in politics, the behavior in business and professions. I just very sad, I think, that people there's a sort of selfishness, there's an ego, there's a level of egocentricity about it's a self-belief in themselves. I think it's just sad in this world that with all the educations available, all the communications available, all the ability to see to learn from history, I find it extraordinary and just very sad that there are people in leadership positions, some in very, very powerful positions, that seem to think it's all about them and all about the power they can get, the handles of power, if you like, they get their hands on, and forget that leadership is not about them. Leadership is never about the leader. It's always about the people around you. And how can you lead them better than you find them, and lead whether it's an organization, a country, a department, whatever it is, a division, you leave them better than you can find them. That's what this is all about. And that would be my great wish.
Thank you. Do you have a mantra that you live by?
Well, leaving people in places better than I find them is probably one of the important ones for me. If I can, there's a level of, to put on a slightly more humorous angle to that. If I'm in a lift somewhere, I might be in a lift with somebody in a building like I was yesterday at sort of lunchtime, let's say, and I don't know who the individual is. I might say to her or him, "Are you having a good day?" And they'll say, "Well, yeah, okay so far. How are you going?" And I'll say, my response is always, "Well, my measure of success is how many people have I upset so far? And if I haven't upset anybody, I'm probably having quite a good day. And more importantly, so are they. So that's my measure of success." So I think mantras, there's so many I could pour out to you, but probably the most important question I ask myself every day, and before every meeting, even this conversation we're having now, is who, why, where, how, what, when, in that order. Who am I meeting with right now? Who am I going to see right now? Who is this person? What's going on in their world, as best I can tell? And who, Larry? Which Larry are they expecting? The appropriately authentic Larry. Can I get away with wearing my leather jacket and a polo? Do I need to put on a suit, for example? Just that bit. But mindset, attitude, and so forth. So which Larry is she or he expecting? Why are we actually meeting? Why am I having a conversation? What's the purpose of this? What's her purpose or his purpose? What's my purpose? So therefore, where must I take them as best possible? So at the end of this meeting, I want to leave them with something useful, possibly, or at least an overarching thought. How will I do that? What will that look like? And then when do I know if succeeding, what happens next, if you like? So the who, why, where, how, what, when, to me, those 6 questions in the book are fundamental to, I believe, everybody in any situation, but particularly in leader position. As I walk into the office, walk onto the factory floor, walk into the business, walk on the mine site, which Larry, or who's here first in terms of workforce, what's going on in their lives? Is it customer? Is it the regulator, the government department? Is it a supplier? Who and which Larry are they expecting? Why are we here? What's the real purpose? Overarching purpose, the purpose of this meeting. So what's the purpose? Where do you want to get to? And how can I, as a leader of thought, leader in this organization, how can I help them do that, and so forth? And I think, unfortunately, too many people, they don't think like that. And they think more around, well, I've got a meeting today. What am I going to do? What's the meeting about? And what do I need to do? And how will I do that? That's about as far as you get. And maybe there'll be a cursory glance at the audience or the participants, but probably missing the opportunity to make a real difference.
Is there anything that keeps you up at night, or do you sleep well?
Well, that's again a good question. It depends rather. It's funny. It's quite irrelevant. I slept very well last night because I was pretty tired. I got back quite late from the city, but sometimes I do wake up about 3 or 4 in the morning and then have an hour, and then usually get back to sleep, and then of course the alarm clock goes off just to get back to sleep. I'm pretty good. I survive on quite little sleep, actually. I shouldn't say that because we're all supposed to have 7, 8, 9 hours sleep, and I certainly would encourage people to have that. But I'm very lucky, I think, that I do seem to get away with 4 or 5 hours if necessary. And there are occasions in this job because a lot of my clients are offshore, and they have not much respect for time down this part of the world, as you may have noticed where you are. And as we're even further away in terms of time from the center of the world, so-called. And so particularly Americans have not a clue. So they want to have a meeting midday their time in New York. Well,
at 12.
Exactly.
And then we have to be there at 12 a.m. or 2 a.m.
We do. You know it well with your podcast, Nick.
Yes.
And I've done the same.
Yes.
I go to bed sometimes about 10, and I get up at 1 or 2 and go a meeting like this. and then go back to bed. In fact, even done it twice. You can get up and then go back at 2 or something, get up at 4. And crazy, really. So I sort of seem to be capable of managing with not much sleep, but ideally, I always aim for about 7 hours if I can.
Wow. Okay, Larry, last question. If you could create a quote right now for you to leave to the audience listening and the world as your legacy, what would it be?
Well, my book is full of good quotes, as people kindly said, and they're not mine, but they're some good ones. But probably the one at the beginning of the book is probably the one that I go for, because it's really what I named my business after, or who I named it after. You may or may not be aware, but there was a famous Scottish poet a couple of hundred years ago called Robert Burns. He was then the Scottish bard. Shakespeare was the English bard, and a couple of hundred years later, Robert Burns was the Scottish bard. And he died quite young, but he had a terrific sense of humour. He was a clever guy, a terrific sense of humour, and he liked taking the mickey, he liked sort of poking fun, if you like, at authority, which I do in a way too, not in a nasty way, but just try and bring people down to earth a bit. And so there's a very famous there's a famous quotation from Burns, which most people in English speaking language are aware of, and you may be aware of it too, I hope. And it's now let me quote the stanza. It said, "Oh, would some power, the gifty God, that is, the gifty give us, to see ourselves as others see us. It would from many a blunder free us, and foolish notion, and even fancy airs and graces lee us, and self-devotion." In other words, you wouldn't be quite so pleased with yourself when if you had a better look in the mirror. And I think all of us just need that occasionally. Particularly people in leadership positions need to be a bit more self-aware. There's lots of really good people out there, but no one's perfect. We don't need to be perfect. We just need to be a bit self-aware. What are our strengths? And what are our shortcomings? And under pressure, where do we go? And what is that impression we give people? And what are they expecting of us as a leader? And as I said already, when you asked that question about what I want to see the change in the world, I think too many leaders let people down. So Robert Burns, it was that my Scottish heritage, I'm actually half French as well as Scots, but my Scottish heritage got me thinking about what do I call this business, and I wanted to call it, my name Robertson was a good Scots name. And I remind myself, my father would often quote Robert Burns, and particularly that particular stanza, but other parts of other writings from Burns. And I thought that's perfect what I do, actually. It sums up, in a way, what I'm trying to do. I'm helping to be a bit more self-aware, aware of others' expectations, and to be a bit better at being themselves as leaders and as people. And so Robertson Burns became the name of the business. And that quote has been always, if you like, the mainstay in my head, along with many others. But that's probably the one that sits there. And it's the epilogue. It's the first page in the book.
Oh, wow! And you memorized it by heart. I love that. So, Larry, how can people reach out to you?
Well, they can reach out to me on any way. I'm happy to do that. I'm on LinkedIn, of course. LinkedIn, Larry. I think it's Larry Robertson True Leadership. I think it is, or Larry Hugh Robertson. And I've got a website, not the world's best. We were trying to change it a bit for Larry. It was sort of put together another rush. I always had a Robertson Burns website, went forward with the detail. We had to put one together in a rush. I was let down a bit. We had to put one in a hurry late last year for the book, because in the book, and here, this is the little handout I give people on the book. And so in the book, actually, it has my website. And I thought, well, gosh, I better have something there when people buy the book and want to look at the website. So LarryRobertson.net is the website, www.larryrobertson.net. And otherwise, LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me if people want to find me. And the book's available. I don't know about Kuala Lumpur, but it's certainly available at Changi Airport. I do know that. It was there not long ago. Someone said they bought it at Changi. So maybe Kuala Lumpur Airport, I don't know. It's been around. It's been selling around the world. Publishing, I could talk all day about publishing, so I won't go that far, but publishing is a bit of a black box. It's a very different world to what most of us live in. But nevertheless,
it's so different with advertising.
Very. But
usually those two go together, right? Advertising and publishing, but then no.
No, but I'm very grateful that the London publisher took me on. I mean, it was very good of them to take me on. It was a bit of a gamble, and it's certainly been selling quite well, I think. But like any author, I suppose, you probably want to sell a bit more. But no, I think it's not so much the book in itself. It's more around the message in the book, I think, which is the important thing.
Wow. Thank you for that. And there you have it, guys. You heard it from the person himself, Larry Robertson. Before we close off, Larry, I'd like to thank you personally for the work that you're doing for the world and for advancing every step of the way despite the challenges, creating trails for those that will come after you. For our listeners, this has been that one podcast with that controversial name, You're Worthless. Read that again, the juxtaposition of your very soul. Now, if you find yourself thinking that you are worthless, you're probably not alone. But more importantly, ask yourself a level deeper. If I'm worthless, then why the heck am I here? It is because your soul have chosen to be here energetically all the way from the ethers. And for that reason itself, you are worthy and you are enough. This has been Larry Robertson, your guest of the day, and Nick Nieras, your host, signing off. Thank you very much, Larry.
Thank you very much, Nick.